What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Vicktory Life Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, former All-Conference offensive lineman Dwight Vick, and also my friend, my brother, my other co-host, Danny Nokes, also known for Nokes during the Vic 757 show, talking all things tech, along with doing radio shows for 106.7 The Fan. The great Danny Nokes is in the building. D, what's good with you, man?
A lot's good, man. A lot's good. And I tell you what, it's definitely been a long time since we last synced up, but it always seems like it's a long time away from you, pal. Glad to be doing it again. We got a lot to cover. We got a lot to cover.
We got a lot to cover. Since we scheduled this in the last 3 days, man, I got my notes here, man. We got KD right before we got on requested a trade, which is crazy. That's right. You got USC and UCLA trying to go to the Big Ten, which usually when they make that announcement, then it's probably been in the works already on the golf courses across the country. And then you also have, yesterday came out, the ACC finally put it out there. They're moving forward with the new 3-3-5 model, which is, I'm still trying to understand, but basically what had Tech fans, especially the old school ones, in the uproar is that our conference consistent 3-game schedule includes Pitt, UVA, and Wake Forest. No more UNC, no more BC, which I'm in favor of, and no more Miami, which I don't like. But we'll talk about that in a second, man. We're not going to cover all the NBA stuff because even as we record this episode, I'm sure when we log off, it's going to be more stuff popping off, man. Probably. Who knows what happens at 1 o'clock in the morning. NBA, they've done a great job trying to compete with the NFL when it comes to the offseason. But I want to talk to you real quick, man. Like, what do you think about, not the Big Ten so much and what that means for the ACC, but just ACC in general, the future of the conference, and more so the new schedule that takes place next year? What do you think about that?
Well, when it comes to the new schedule, I mean, there's no doubt I 100% agree with you that it's a disappointment. Tech is no longer going to be playing UNC in Miami every year. It really feels like they should be. Certainly as one of the premier football programs in the ACC, they should have been at least on a couple of the marquee matchups, and the Tech Miami rivalry. I don't need to explain it to you. You know it better than anybody. Okay. That is one of the best rivalries that this conference has to offer. And now we're not going to see it every single year. And they were playing on the same side of the conference. So that part is disappointing. It's a good thing, like you said, though. No Boston College, no useless trips up to Chestnut Hill, right? They always seem to trip us up. And they're just a gritty team. It's hard to go and win up there, but it's similarly hard to go and win up in Pittsburgh at Heinz Field. And, the Tech hasn't had a whole lot of success up there. So, there's a little bit of give and take. Overall, I think it's fine, right? I think the new format is going to work. I think it's overall better for the conference and for the matchups that we're going to hopefully now see more often, right? Tech's going to play Florida State. Not quite as soon, actually, as they would have under the former schedule, but they will still play Clemson relatively soon here. And those games were fun, despite Tech losing in most of them most recently. But when it comes to the ACC's future as a whole, I think you have to be incredibly concerned about it. Now, I don't know if it's ever going to be dissolved completely. Something is rich in tradition as the ACC, right? Even if all the teams leave, it's hard to imagine other teams not going to the ACC and then, just taking the place of Tech, UVA, Clemson, Florida State, every team that we're now probably expecting to leave the conference, because at this point you have to kind of look at it from the standpoint, well, Tech could get left behind. The way that college football and college sports are trending right now, it's always been dictated by money. And now there's just a whole lot more of it being thrown around with the NIL. And that's obviously not the main cause of what's happening with the conference restructuring, but all of it has made the landscape of college sports look a lot different than it did 5-10 years ago. So people are still adjusting to that. But, I have to think Tech's athletic director, Whit Babcock, has already been, working back channels to see what their options are going to be. I don't know if we'll see Tech jump ship in the next 5 or even 10 years, but we certainly could. The news from USC and UCLA, it's certainly not something that I was expecting to happen right now. Over time, sure. it was the same thing with Texas and Oklahoma, probably inevitable. The Big 12 with football is kind of maybe the least competitive conference of all the Power Fives. So you could say that about the ACC too, though, with all the success that Clemson's had. Now, that's starting to change a little bit because Clemson's not as good, but it is just fascinating to see what's happening. If we get 2 mega conferences, I don't really know how I feel about it, because it's going to put us up against some teams that we hardly ever saw. We're going to get some really good matchups that are probably not going to go in our favor. Certainly not as Brent Pry gets going, if it were to happen soon, but I don't necessarily expect it to happen as soon as USC and UCLA are going to be in the Big Ten, which is 2024, I believe.
I have 2 thoughts that come to mind, D, when you were speaking. I was just listening and I was reflecting. I think life is about opportunities when it comes to business, your personal endeavors, when you step out on faith, a career move, when you pop the question to your lady or whatever. I think when it comes down to it, Virginia Tech has always been many ways opportunistic and in the right situation, especially when it came to expansion. And of course, we know the story, with the governor putting the pressure on UVA to make sure they voted us in, to make sure we didn't get left behind. Getting Michael Vick when everyone was chasing Ronald Curry, getting a guy like Beamer, who took over a program on probation that was getting ready to fall apart. And next thing you know, he makes history. Beamer ball becomes an iconic term in college football, the lunch pail D. But at the same time, I look at the great late Jim Weaver, God rest his soul. Mm-hmm. And I remember you and Kyle Bailey were doing radio at the time in Blacksburg. And I remember how he scoffed at the idea, because truth be told, and everyone in the know like you and I knows, the SEC wanted Virginia Tech. They wanted Virginia Tech extremely bad because we had the market. At the time, we were a very good football program. And it just made sense, not so much as demographics and location and proximity like it does with ACC, but as far as our football culture and the fact that we would have definitely benefited financially from that. And we missed the boat. Everyone knows, you and I know people, we can't speak about who told us, but several people, is this not sources, knew Virginia Tech, it was on the table, and we didn't make the move. And loyalty can sometimes get you hurt. You've seen it when you were waiting on that girl to marry, or maybe the girl's waiting on the guy, and all of a sudden they break up after 4 years and he marries the next thing, and she's sitting there, listening to love songs, trying to figure things out. The other thing I think about, man, when you were talking, and I want to say this before we bring our first guest on to the Vicktory Life Legacy Podcast, but I look at the fact that this is kind of sad when it comes to college football, because the greed is starting to take over, where I'm not so much nostalgic when it comes to traditions. I like when the game and the sport evolves. But these super mega conference that you mentioned that I've been reading about today since before we recorded this podcast is really disturbing, because there will be some very good programs left behind. When it comes to Virginia Tech football, I definitely think Brent Pry is the right guy. I definitely think Whit Babcock has proven he's a phenomenal AD, especially with our other sports. The men's basketball team just won the ACC. Mm-hmm. You saw what the baseball and softball teams did, and they continue to ascend, the track team. But at the same time, I wonder the future of these conferences and what it's going to do. It's just one of those things where you just wonder, like, will we now flirt with the SEC again? Because all it takes is one ACC team to make the move this summer, right, to make that announcement, a Miami or Florida State, and then we're going to be scrambling. And I'm not saying we should be loyal or not loyal to the ACC. We have to do what's best for Virginia Tech.
For sure.
And that's what it comes down to. I know you have fans like, well, what does this mean? This is business, okay? This is a business, and you got to be in a situation where you understand the business and what that means for Virginia Tech football and Virginia Tech sports and revenue and TV deals. It's been well documented. The ACC TV deal is janky.
Mm-hmm. To say
it's
the least.
Janky at the least. We just lost Packer and those guys that on ESPNU. That shows dissolve an ACC network. They struggle at times, with coverage and some of, it's just one of those things that if you're a Tech fan or even an ACC football fan, you should be concerned.
Yeah. And it's very concerning. And, I think when it comes down to it, what it's not going to do, two mega conferences, what it's not going to do is make things more competitive. Now, you could easily make the counterpoint that if Tech, let's just say in this scenario, does go to the SEC and the SEC becomes a power conference, you could say that you're going to play Alabama every single year, and that might bring you more recruits. But at the same time, if you see them or any of those SEC teams at whatever frequency that you're going to see them, if you get your rear end handed to you in the regular season, no one's going to want to see that again in the college football playoff. So I don't necessarily think that it's going to make things more competitive if it goes to that. And we lose out on a lot of the rivalries. So you're right to be concerned in the direction that it's headed right now. And I'm very excited to see the face of our next guest, who I haven't seen in a very long time. Old friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Join us right now. For those listening on SoundCloud and those watching us on YouTube, you can see we have joined by one of the best guys in the business, Chris Coleman, at Tech Sideline. This guy is one of my favorite people. I call him after losses, after wins. And it's crazy because I got him on here before all this stuff transpired. I wanted to get him on here, and he's going to talk about it and join us to break down the new ACC schedule format. But since then, you have all this stuff going on with KD. And then since then, on top of that, you have USC and UCLA with the Big Ten news. And then what does that mean for Virginia Tech with the new schedule? So Chris, what's good with you, boss? How you doing?
Man, it's a busy week, Dwight. A lot of guys committing, and now we've got conference realignment all over again, which, you can only keep the conference realignment stuff quiet for so long. It seems like once a year, some major news item comes out, and it's always during the summer, of course, when we're all supposed to be relaxed and enjoying a nice little vacation from football, but nah, not so much.
Well, your guy Will, I always tell you, when I played, you guys were, as Tech was climbing the ranks and becoming credible and a national power, Tech Sideline was the first out there before all these other ones on Twitter. They were the ones that broke down the game. And I must say, the matchups, I've never to this day seen an analysis like that. But you guys, you and Will, you built your program and your company from the ground up. And you've seen Tech in the Big East, you've seen them as an independent. Now you see them in ACC. So your insight is definitely credible. When you look at, let's start with the schedule. I want your thoughts. I always love to pick your brain. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this new schedule as we move forward? Not so much this year, but next year, we move away from the divisions and we go into just straight the two best teams play in the ACC.
It's my biggest issue with the big super conferences these days is that you cannot have balanced scheduling in leagues anymore. You remember, you played in the Big East, you played same teams every year and you rotate. One year you get them at home, the next year you get them on the road. You knew what you were getting every year. I think with the conference realignment and these conferences getting so much bigger, it's killing some rivalries. Obviously, Virginia Tech and West Virginia went years without playing. And I think that hurt both fan bases, in my opinion, because from a Virginia Tech perspective, UVA was down, so they couldn't really hit back. We weren't playing West Virginia. Miami wasn't the Miami of the 90s and early 2000s. So those are the three games kind of you mark on your calendar when you see the schedule every year. And you're like, well, one of them's not there at all. UVA is going to go 2-10, and Miami's going to go 6-6 and not be relevant. So it kind of took, I think the big conferences have robbed us of some things. And now I think the Miami game, which is, I know is on your mind because you were on the teams when that rivalry was born. It was big. All of those games were nationally relevant. All of them.
Yes.
And I know that's not so much the case anymore. But yeah, from a nostalgia standpoint, it's disappointing. That being said, I'm not sure that your modern Virginia Tech player truly grasps the historic nature of the rivalry.
Not at all.
Yeah. So
not at all.
I think fans do, but I think your player is I think a Virginia Tech player would be more likely to look at the schedule and say, oh, we don't play UNC this year. That sucks because my buddy from Greensboro plays for UNC. Mm-hmm. Right. And I will miss I'm going to say miss because we're still going to play them. Look, it's not going to be like Clemson and NC State and Louisville and all that. You don't play those guys for 10 years, you know? So on balance, I think the schedule's better because over those 4 years, we're going to be playing Louisville, NC State, Florida State, and Clemson 8 times over 2 years. We played them 5 times between 2014 and 2021. I mean, it's going to be so much better from that standpoint. But it's you gotta take the bad with the good, I guess. I personally, my number one villain right now is North Carolina. And I love playing North Carolina every year. Like, I don't know any Miami fans. I don't know a single Miami fan.
Understandable.
But right, exactly. but growing up in Danville, man, I do a ton of UNC fans.
Mm-hmm.
They can't name a single building on UNC's campus for the most part,
Of
except for
course.
the Dean Dome. But but you know, they will talk trash, you know, when they do beat Tech. And Tech recruits against them so much, even more so than the Tech UVA rivalry. Like under Bronco Mendenhall at UVA and Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech, in-state recruiting for both those schools dropped off. So it was rare when you saw Virginia Tech versus UVA. These two guys went to the same high school and they're playing against each other, or one went to Phoebus and one went to Hampton and now they're playing against each other. And you saw that all the time back in the day. These days, you know, Dax Holyfield and Trey Turner this past year's UNC game, they could run off that whole UNC roster of guys they played with or against in high school and that they knew from camps and things like that. So I love the regional aspect of college football. So for me, it's a shame to lose the UNC game because of that, because it's a heated rivalry, because so many of those players know each other. But I'm very happy that we will be playing NC State again. I'm very glad that Florida State will actually play in Lane Stadium for the first time since 2012. So it's pluses and minuses, I would say.
Yeah, and I was always surprised when the schedule dropped the new model, Chris, that UNC and Miami weren't a part of Tech's trio, because as I was telling Dwight earlier in the show, Tech is, at least recently in the last 20 years, one of the more successful programs in the conference. And you would think that the ACC would want to have those annual matchups with Miami and UNC from Virginia Tech's standpoint, and from the league standpoint too, because I mean, even if all three of those programs haven't really been exactly consistent over the last 5 years, you'd still think that they would want to see those games.
Right. You would think so. And I think this is where obviously the SEC has an advantage of and ultimately how the ACC was built in the 50s holds it back. And then they doubled down on that. So many small private schools in this league, you know, like 3,000 people go to Wake Forest, you know, Duke's not a big school, Syracuse, private school where they're not really into football, Boston College, same thing. You know, Miami's a big name, but nobody goes to Miami games. The SEC, with the exception of Vanderbilt, I mean, it doesn't matter your scheduling model. You could do it blindfolded and just do that, and you're going to come up with good matchups each and every week. Like, you have to be really strategic about it in the ACC. But the thing is, if you set up every week a Virginia Tech versus Florida State or a Clemson and NC State and things like that, that means there's more Boston College versus Syracuse, right? And nobody's going to watch that. So there's really no way, I think, for the ACC to solve this because of the type of schools that are in the ACC. There's really only 4 big state schools that I would consider passionate football fan bases or SEC-like fan bases. And, you know, Clemson, Florida State, Virginia Tech, NC State.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina will show up when they think they're good, and then as soon as they realize that they're more style than substance, they're like, "Oh, when's basketball season?" Yeah, and North Carolina, I mean, Virginia, like even Bronco Mendenhall improved them, and they're still getting 30, 40,000 people in attendance and things like that. So I wish there were more teams like the 4 teams I mentioned earlier in the ACC. If there were, we're not having this conversation. But there's just too many schools in this league whose fan bases don't care about football.
Yeah, you're right, man. And, you know,
Why is West Virginia not in this league, Dwight?
Oh my God! You know why? Because of academics and perception.
I know.
No. It's stupid because they make sense. I can speak on this from being on the field. Even when I played during the golden era of the UVA Tech rivalry, UVA was relevant. We were ranked, they were ranked, but the UVA game was huge, but Miami and West Virginia were bigger. Mm-hmm. They were conference games. West Virginia and us, as far as Tech goes, we had the same mindset when it came to football. Mm-hmm. It was nasty. It was real. I mean, I remember seeing Daryl tapping him after I left, watching the game when Vinny Fuller returned that blocked field goal. And we won that game, and they were ranked, I think, like 6th in the country. Mm-hmm. We were ranked lower, and Daryl Tapp's walking off the field, flicking off their fans. Uh-huh. I remember that Daryl Tapp. He, depending on where he's at, he will remember it. But
I've got a great picture of Carlton Powell on the sideline at the end of the 2005 game in Morgantown, and he's doing the exact same thing to the West Virginia fans.
Well, that's the game my cousin Marcus went off.
Uh-huh.
I mean, look, I don't have a problem with what he did because I played in that stadium, and plus that was a big win because we were in the ACC and him and Jeff King were killing it, and they had Pat White. We won that game. That was a great game, and
they went 10-1 that year. We were their only loss.
Speak on it. See, again, I know we have to evolve and move on, but there's historical perspective and relevance that makes sense. I don't get West Virginia. I think. Chris, I want you to speak on this. Right before you jumped on, I was telling Danny that Virginia Tech is historically, when it came to football, many times been on the right side of history, getting Beamer, a coach, to take over a program on probation, getting Mike Vick to come when everyone was focused on Ronald Curry. He was the best kept secret in the country.
Beamer not going to UNC.
Yes, Beamer not going to UNC, joining the ACC and UVA, helping us out. We've been in situations, but I also feel like, God rest his soul, my guy, Jim Weaver, when he scoffed at the idea, and I know it wasn't just his decision, but us three, given in the business we do, we know the SEC wanted Virginia Tech desperately. They were all in on us, and he scoffed at the idea. Do you feel like, looking back, we missed the boat when it came to making that move to the SEC from a revenue standpoint?
Oh, yeah, from a revenue standpoint, for sure. I think there's one thing that people don't think about with that is, it took a considerable amount of political clout in Richmond to get Virginia Tech that invitation to the ACC. So you're talking about less than 10 years later, all those people who helped get you politically into the ACC, you're just going to tell them, now we're leaving, and all that work you put in to get Virginia Tech and Virginia into the same conference. So there's always more forces at work. I mean, especially with Virginia Tech being a state school and clearly not as reliant on state funding as back in the day, but still reliant to a certain extent. So I think there was a lot of things going on there at the time. It's one of those situations where it would have benefited football for sure, which drives the bus. I don't think it would have benefited basketball. Who knows about the other sports? I've always thought like the other sports, they should be more regional. Like there's going to be no reason for the Rutgers volleyball team to have to fly to LA to play a Tuesday night Big Ten volleyball game, right? Mm-hmm. That's stupid. So to me, like sports like that, I mean, Virginia Tech, UNC, NC State, they should, yes, play men's soccer, but the other teams in whatever soccer conference should be like the other regional schools to cut down on travel costs and things like that. But as far as the big sports go, I mean, from a revenue perspective, they missed the boat in a big way. How beneficial would that be? Depends on how the money is used. Obviously, the competition would be greater.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can write a book one day. Let's say Virginia Tech never gets into the SEC. You could probably write a 300-page book, some sort of historical analysis, a what-if scenario on what would have happened to the program if they had gotten into the SEC. It's sad that we're talking about this, guys, because think about how Virginia Tech wandered the conference wilderness through all those years. They were an independent for football. They were the Metro for basketball. Finally got in the Big East for football, but the Big East wouldn't let them in for all sports. So they
I
stayed in the Metro for a year, and then the Metro folded. They became Conference USA and wouldn't let Tech in Conference USA. So Tech had to go to the A10 for all sports. Then the Big East finally let Tech in for all sports, but never gave them a full share of the revenue. Right. And then after 4 years, boom, you're in the ACC. So we've had a conference home for all sports for less than 20 years. Compare that to like UVA, who's had a conference home for all sports since 1953. I mean,
that's crazy to think about.
It really is. I mean, the lack of stability at Virginia Tech, I would say it's amazing what we have done as an overall athletic department, considering all of that. I mean, we've had so many different conference homes throughout, and it's really hard to build a baseball program when you're in the Atlantic 10.
Yeah.
And you're in ACC country, things like that. So I think what Virginia Tech has done across all sports is, considering that background, has been extremely impressive. But, football drives the bus, and that extra revenue would benefit everyone.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because Dwight, you mentioned the pressure that the governor was putting on UVA to vote Tech into the ACC when that was happening, and Chris just spoke on the politics behind the Hokies actually making it into the ACC. The whole thing is crazy to think about it unraveling as we talk about two mega conferences. But part of the reason too that I think Brent Pry is so popular right now, and he is doing a very good job. He's doing a lot of the things that Fuente and his staff refused to do or weren't doing as well. He's doing well, but they haven't played any football games, so a lot of it's not going to matter if he doesn't win football games.
You gotta win.
But I think people too are kind of, he brings a bit of nostalgia with him, because he was at Tech in the mid 90s, and guys like Dwight know him. He's going to bring a hard-nosed defensive style of football to Tech, which is what every Tech fan is used to watching under Bud Foster, and hammer it down your throat with the run game, the great running backs that they've had. So I just think that the positive vibes around the football program right now, and they have been particularly positive this offseason, are the nostalgia that he brings in on top of the good job. And so the news today, or the news over the last couple of days and the last couple of months of conference realignment, is just kind of bringing us back down to earth.
Well, I hate it, yo. I hate it, man. It to me, like before Chris joined, I told you, Danny, it saddens me because I know where this is headed. I'm not worried about Virginia Tech missing out. I see some of the Twitters right now going crazy with, football's over, we're going to be left behind, we should have done this. That's just social media. But I hate the fact that we're getting commits, we're recruiting the state hard. I was at Tech last week in the football office and the basketball offices, and the football coaches are locked in. This has been a great offseason. I talked to J.C. Pearson, Coach Derek Jones. I mean, they're locked in. The energy is great, but then you have this overshadowing. And I just think the best way for Tech, no matter what the schedule is, we got to win ball games. But Chris, one last question: when you look at Pry, you look at the recruiting so far, and you look at what we just talked about, the focus and his energy and his experience, not so much as a head coach, but being at Penn State and fielding some of the best defenses in the country. What are your expectations for this season? I'm not going to give you the whole over/under. What do you think wins? I hate when people do that. But what is your prognosis, or what your guesstimate, so to speak?
I think Virginia Tech is one of those teams. I think throughout, you see a lot of teams like this in college football. I think so much of the elite talent is stacked at the top these days, which means there's no parity in terms of competing for a national title, but it means that more teams in the middle all kind of have the same talent level. And I think there's a whole bunch of teams in college football that, depending on random things like turnovers, key injuries, official reviews, things like that, can go anywhere between 4-8 and 8-4.
Yeah.
And so that's how I view Virginia Tech. I think if everything goes wrong, they can go 4-8 this year. If everything goes right, they can go 8-4. The reality is probably somewhere in between. I think you'll be able to look at the team and say that's a well-coached football team, but I think they need some more playmakers, and I've heard that he's said that to some people off the record, and I mean offense and defense. I think they're solid, but like, what offensive player is going to pick up that? Who's going to run it in from 40 yards out? It's a lot easier to score on a 6-play drive than a 14-play drive. Right. It's hard to crank out 5 yards at a time these days in college football. I think it's something that's going to have to be built over time. I think you said the Fuente era got off to a hot start, but it fizzled out as his weaknesses came to light, which was basically buy-in and player development. And I think that's the most important part of Virginia Tech football is recruiting guys that buy in and that understand and accept your idea of player development. Red shirt if you need to. Not everybody's going to get to start as a freshman because guess what? You were a 3-star recruit. You're not big enough right now. You've got to put on 20 pounds. If we play you right now, you're probably just going to get hurt. So everybody needs to take time to develop. And I think it's very important. And you're seeing this. I think not only is he making an in-state effort, but he's really putting a focus like on certain high schools. It seems like not only in the state of Virginia, but there are certain high schools. Bishop McDevitt up in Pennsylvania is a great school, a great football school, and you can rely on those coaches up there to give you accurate analysis of their own players. You can rely on Lauren Johnson to tell you the truth about his players. Does this player show up in January and put in the work? Does he show up in May, in June, and July in the weight room? Things you have to do these days to be a top-notch football player. It's a 12-month sport these days. I heard something the other day. I won't say who he is, but he's ranked in the top 10 in the state of Virginia, and he's committed to North Carolina. And I've heard he hasn't shown up to a single offseason workout with his team this offseason. And there's a reason why UNC, they're so concerned about recruiting rankings and perception. I don't think they do their research on stuff like this. That's a reason a bunch of top 100, top 200 recruits goes out there and goes 6-6, right?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, to me, that's just the way it is. Right. And I enjoy talking. I enjoy throwing shade on UNC, but I'm also serious about that. I mean, I'm very serious about what I think makes Virginia Tech successful. And, you've got to go into that high school in Northern Virginia. You've got to know that head coach, and you've got to know that you can trust him to say, yeah, he's got all these offers, but if his work ethics, it's a little questionable in the offseason. So maybe you don't just pursue that guy as heavily. When you don't do it, you get criticized by your fan base because they don't know those stories, of course. But like I said, it's just you've got to know those high school coaches, and you've got to be able to trust their evaluations. You can evaluate their talent level. You're a college coach. You should be able to do that. But it's not like you can go in there and be around those guys all year round and judge their work ethic and their character and things like that. So I think Brent Pry understands all that. So I think we're going to get better buy-in into the off-season program. And as a result, we're going to have better player development at Virginia Tech. Now, that's not going to happen overnight because, 1 year, one off-season in a weight room doesn't make a football player. It takes an entire career. So it's going to be a gradual process. But the good thing is I didn't see anybody hit the transfer portal after the spring due to, I thought I was being worked too hard and things like that. It was all playing time issues.
Boy, don't get me started.
Well, which shows me that these guys are willing, and he's been able to get them to buy in. And I think that's the best sign you can take away from the Brent Pry tenure at this point before he's lost a football game yet.
Right.
Yeah, no, Chris, no, you dead on, man. And I was up there, and that was the vibe I got. And that's the feedback I was getting from the coaches, is that these guys are locked in. And I'll just say this, 6, 7, 8 wins is all great for me. I just need to see a competent football team that doesn't call timeout and then runs the same play and runs the same play and gets an illegal procedure or they lined up wrong, or we run the same play in the red zone when the quarterback should keep. I just want to see a team with an identity, man.
Yeah.
Tech was so tough to watch. So
exactly,
tough.
Exactly.
Tough.
Especially coming from your era when you had an identity. And it was really frustrating. Like you take it back. Let's take these 2 games in 2020, for an example. Like 1 week, Liberty comes out and physically mauls Virginia Tech. Like you got 296-foot offensive linemen pushing us around. And then the next week, we go out there and physically push Miami around, right? We sacked them 7 times. And I know they came back and beat Tech in the fourth quarter, but Virginia Tech physically was the better team for the majority of the game. Yeah. So how can you let yourself get pushed around by Liberty and then you go out there the next week and push around Miami? It's a mental thing, man. It's about getting yourself mentally focused every week. Absolutely.
And look, we got to let you go, Chris, but I'll just say this to that point. Knowing who I know and talking to people, the difference in what you say, you're 100% dead on. That's because J.C. Price was running the show against Miami, and he brought that intensity. I'm not crediting him for the way the kids play because it's the coaching staff, but energy and mindset is a true thing. Momentum and having that attitude. J.C. is about that life, and he brings that smoke as a coach. I just never was a fan of a lot of stuff that they were doing before J.C. took over, like even like the whole quiet eating, pregame meal. You couldn't talk. You had to raise your hand. That was awful. I mean, when you talk to former players, even not just at Tech, at Maryland, at Miami, at Norfolk State, no matter what school they tell you, that's just asinine. Because you want to be focused.
I've never heard of that at any point.
That's just dumb, man. Yeah. It's just dumb. But Chris, man, we appreciate you, man. You my guy as always. I love your insight. You're one of the best in the business, man. Of course, we're going to have you back on. I'm definitely going to try to get you on the Vic 757 show, talking all things Tech, hopefully to break down the Hokie win, man. But just remind all the fans listening and watching, how can they follow you and what do you guys got coming up before we let you go?
TechSideline.com, man. We're busy right now with all the commitments and things. We got another one, at least one more coming tomorrow, 2 on Saturday, 1 next week. Follow me personally on Twitter, Chris Coleman, TSL. We'll be down at the ACC meetings in July. Which
we'll both miss you, Chris. We'll both miss you for that.
Yeah. Should be good. Should be good times. We enjoy that every year. But yeah, it's it's hard to believe. Like really, like 5 weeks football practice starts.
Yeah. End of this month.
Yes. It's gonna get rocking. It's crazy. It's just going by fast, man. We appreciate you though, man. As always, you guys do great work, man. Always. Thanks again, man.
Yep.
Take care, boss.
Yep.
See you soon, buddy. Thanks, man.
Chris Coleman of Tech Sideline, man. Make sure you guys give him a follow. Check him out on Twitter, man. He by far is one of the best in the business, man. And I could listen to him talk Tech sports, not just football. He knows the game when it comes to Tech sports, man. Him and Will, they're the GOATs because they started this before the Nokes Notes, before Vicktory Life, before all these podcasts. Tech Sideline was breaking down the game. And if you ever read their articles, I know people don't like to read as much as they used to because everything's digital, but they used to give us like they still do it, the breakdown of matchups. I mean, they go from everything to special teams, but Chris Coleman is a one-in-a-kind special guy, man. Speaking of special guys, I met this guy recently when he was hired, man. We are joined now by Virginia Tech defensive recruiting coordinator and cornerbacks coach, Coach Derek Jones, also known as the Cheetah. A great Twitter follow. Make sure you give him a follow. He drops gems. He has a knack for attention. Coach, how you doing, man? What's going on with you?
Man, I'm good, guys. Man, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, man, no. You're on with my co-host, Danny Nokes, as I told you, man, when we were prepping for this, man. 106.7 The Fan. He also joins us on the Vic 757 show with myself and Mike Vick with Nokes, man. So he's a Tech guy. I'm a Tech guy. And you're now a Tech guy. You're a coach, man. I saw you last week up there with Pearson and JC. You guys, I was just telling Danny and Chris how you guys are working hard. I saw the movement, as far as players coming down for meetings. And it's an exciting time right now. Congratulations. You guys just got to commit as we record this. There's rumors of several more commits, man. But commits aside, man, you are now at Virginia Tech, man. And you're an experienced coach, man. You've been in quite a few places, man. Just talk about your time at Tech so far and what it's been like and how you and your family are getting acclimated.
Man, it's been really good. I tell people all the time, I've had a secret crush on Virginia Tech for a long time. I was on the other sideline for 12 years. And, I think Virginia Tech, without a doubt, has one of the best atmospheres in all of college football, but definitely the ACC. And, just recruiting against those guys during my time at Duke and being a defensive back, knowing the top targets, whether it was in Virginia, whether it was in North Carolina, the DMV area. And, when they got that Virginia Tech offer, you would almost cringe because, you had your work cut out for you. And then just watching those guys play on the field and so many guys that, you knew on the high school level that went on to Virginia Tech, that went on to the NFL level, it's just a joy to be there. And, my family and I are transitioning well. I mean, the thing I'll say about Blacksburg is point blank, wonderful people. I'm a country boy myself, so I'm a small town guy. So I love that feel. but, just being involved in a program where football is everything, whether you're in town, whether you're at the gas station, whether you're at Walmart, everything's about Virginia Tech football, man. So I'm thrilled to be a part of something like that.
Well, we're glad you're here, Coach, and it's great to be talking with you tonight. Hey, you mentioned Blacksburg and what a great town it is. Do you have any favorite places to eat yet? I feel like I've seen you hyping a few places up on Twitter.
Oh yeah, good question, D. That's right.
Without a doubt, man.
Yeah.
PK's.
Oh yeah.
When I got hired there,
I love that.
I actually tried to take a trip to the Waffle House one night when I got hired there, and the Waffle House was closed. I've never seen a Waffle House closed before.
Yeah, man.
I'm riding and I see these lights in the windows say open. So I'm like, I'll try my hand here because I was hungry. And I go in and I asked this guy working there, I'm like, man, y'all still selling food? He was like, yes, sir. I said, can you make me a wing? I said, I see you don't have lemon pepper on the menu, but can you make me a wing? I said, I want a buffalo wing sprinkled with lemon pepper. He said, let me go back in and ask the kitchen. And he came back immediately and he said, yes, sir, I can do that for you. He didn't know who I was. I didn't know who he was. And I went back to my hotel room and I took a picture of the wings because I'm always putting stuff on social media. And the wings were really good. Yeah. And I've called those wings cheetah wings for a long time. So me being silly, I posted the wings on social media. And the next day I wake up, it's gone viral.
So it was. I saw that. Yeah.
I think me and PKs are forever joined now.
No doubt, man. That's how you do it. Brandon, man. That's what's up, Coach, man. Look, I want to ask you this, man. I've been up there. I've been around you a few times, man. I played with Pearson and JC. You guys got a few other guys that came after me that played there, man. Coach Pry was there when he was at GA, when I was there as a youngin' coming up, as the tradition really got going in the 90s with the Sugar Bowl win, and I've seen what he did at Penn State. I know Coach Pry, and I know what he's about, and you know how real he is, but just let everybody checking this out right now, just talk about, not just Coach Pry, but when I'm around you and JC and those guys, it just seems like y'all, in a short period of time, have a brotherhood, man. Like, what, just talk about Pry, the energy, and the coaching staff. You guys take a lot of pictures together. It seems like you're having fun.
It's a good vibe.
Y'all on that bus together, going down to Richmond and Tidewater. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I've never seen in the Berg every coach on the bus going to recruit and going to coaching conventions, man. Just talk about the energy right now. What's going on in the Berg?
Well, man, me and Coach Pry go way back. We've been friends. Coach Pry actually interviewed me for a job, I think maybe 2003, when he was at Louisiana Lafayette and I was at Murray State. And funny story is, man, he interviewed me for this job and he tried to fly me in, and I tore my knee up coaching on the sideline. And so he had to actually fly to me for the interview. Man. And he came to my house. And, being a defensive back coach, a lot of the interview portion of it is demonstrating techniques of what you're going to teach. Well, I'm like literally laid up on the couch, man, in this air cast. And I can't get off the couch. And I've got my poor wife, who is not an athlete at all, trying to demonstrate the drill. So needless to say, I didn't get that job. But he and I just stayed in contact, man. And we worked together a couple of years later at Memphis. Coach Tommy West was the head coach at the time. And he came into my office and he said, I need some names for some really good defensive coaches. I said, I need a linebacker guy and I need a defensive line guy. And I said, I know a guy that can do both. And I gave him Coach Pry's name, and they talked, and he brought him in on an interview, and he hired him. And Coach Pry and I ended up living together in a house for about 6 months. And that's where we really developed the bond that we have now. And, for the last almost 20 years, he and I and my wife and his wife have made a point to get together, whether it's vacation, whether it's getting together at the convention. And we've had a group chat for many years, just sharing pictures of kids, families, pets, or whatever it may be. So, I knew when he took the job that I was definitely going to go to work for him. He called me during the courtship process, and he told me that if he got it, he'd want me to join him. And I told him, despite having a couple other things on the table at the time, that if he got it, I'd be 100% with him. And, I think his energy bleeds down to us all. I think he hired a bunch of guys that are going to have a lot of great ideas. Like you said, I didn't know Pearson and JC from Adam, and I feel like those guys are, my brothers now. We get along very well, and, just them guys educating me daily on the history of not only Virginia Tech defense, but Virginia Tech, the university. I mean, just having guys in the room as a recruiter that you can bounce ideas off of and can educate you, man. It just makes you better at what you do. And to see the pride that both Pearson and JC and Xavier Debe and those guys have for playing at Virginia Tech, man, you want to do it for them. And to be able to pass the phone of a recruit to a guy, or be able to tell a mom that you've got a guy that can explain things better than you can, it's just good. But we enjoy what we do. We love being around one another. As coaches, man, we work a lot of hours, work a lot of time.
Y'all do.
Right.
Speak on it. You all do. Thank you for saying. I know Danny got a question. Thank you. I just want to shout you because I say this all the time. I did a radio show this morning for Big Dog Sports Talk Radio, and I was like, people don't realize, man, these coaches are putting in hours, bro.
Yeah,
hours. I
Days,
know that's your job,
months.
but y'all do it. Yeah, but go ahead, go ahead, D.
Yeah, Coach, I was just gonna say, you guys really do make it look like a lot of fun, and Pearson was someone that I got to know personally because before he joined the staff, he was coaching at Radford there as the defensive coordinator, and he was my co-host when we were doing pregame shows for Tech. So I got the absolute treat to get to know him, and I couldn't be happier for him that he's a part of that staff with you guys. And I'm kind of curious. You mentioned it's been a pretty seamless transition, and the offseason seems to be going really well. I was just curious as to maybe what's your biggest takeaway been so far, because there has to have been a lot that you guys have gone through. Coming in as a new staff, you're trying to implement some schemes and stuff that the guys maybe not are entirely used to. So I'm curious as to, with the spring game that's happened, lots of practices, scrimmages, what's been your biggest takeaway so far?
I think the biggest thing is just the recruiting aspect of it, and focusing on the state of Virginia primarily in our footprint, which is what about a 350-mile radius for us. Coach Pryor was adamant with all of us because we've all been a lot of places. A lot of us have relationships a lot of other places, but he was adamant about making the state of Virginia a priority. And just for me personally, getting the honor, and I'll call it an honor, of being able to recruit the Hampton, Newport News, Yorktown, Williamsburg area, which is where so many Virginia Tech players have come from, man. That's something I don't take lightly. So being able to get into every single school, that's the thing he told us during the spring. And I think, he's a guy that puts his money where his mouth is. I think about 3 weeks in the recruiting cycle, we had maybe a week left. And he said, guys, listen, I know a lot of you guys want to get to your Florida areas and your Georgia areas and places that you've been. He said, but I really would like for you guys to go back and double down with some of these other coaches and go back and see them. So, that was just good for me, knowing that the guy is making this a priority and just getting to know people and feeling like now I've got relationships with some of these coaches, and whether they got a player or not, just going to sit down and, taking your time and being able to spend an hour or 2 hours with people, because, some coaches want you to hit X amount of schools. But the thing about him is he allows you to have relationships, and he wants you to make relationships. And I think that's going to be the backbone of our program for years to come.
No doubt. No, you're right, man. Speaking of the backbone of the program, you coach DBs. And I know because you coached at Duke and other places, and DBU, along with the lunch pail D when Beamer and Foster were running the show, and then even with Beamer ball, those three things resonate when you talk about Virginia Tech football for years. And the DBU legacy, I know a lot of them. And DBs are like sprinters. They have a mindset where no one can touch them. And I like it because, you got to have that mindset and that swag when you play as a defensive back.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the guys you have now, I know you have a lot of guys you guys are bringing in as recruits, some guys that are going to play a lot for you this year. You had the spring a few months ago. Just share with us right now, and those listening and watching, some DBs or just some players that you're coaching right now that you're high on, or some things that stand out to you, some players that we should keep an eye on, as far as not secrets, but just some things that they're doing well.
Yeah, definitely. No, not secrets at all. I've got Dorian Strong, and I've got Breon Murray. Breon Murray is a guy that hadn't played much, man, but he was very impressive to me in the spring. Just doing everything that you asked, the effort that he brings to the table, it's still a little bit raw. He was a junior college guy, I think, that came here and didn't play a lot much, but I think he probably made the most progress of any of the guys in the spring. And I think Dorian Strong is a superstar. I'm excited about coaching him, excited about what he brings to the table. He's completely bought in. So I'm kind of like a kid in a candy store. And then you've got DJ Harvey, and you've got Amari Chapman, who's played a lot of football around here. So you've got some guys in my room in particular who I'm excited about and I think we can win with. And then the one guy in the secondary that probably excites me more than anything is Jamari Connor. That guy's a dude.
He's a freak.
That guy brings an attitude, a mentality. He doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't have to say a whole lot. But Jamari is the guy that, as a coach, you can point to and you say that's how you do it. Whether it's running to the football, whether it's hitting somebody, or whether it's just the mental focus that guy has. So really excited about him. And, you know, Nasir Peoples is a leader, very smart guy, really responding to, you know, Pearson's leadership. So I think we have a chance to be pretty good in the secondary.
No doubt. I love that. I like Strong too. Good point about him.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of guys, Coach, that when I had the pleasure of calling the spring game on the radio this year too. And when we were in our production meeting with Coach Pry, there were several guys that he was excited about that you just mentioned right there. So that's really cool to think about. I'm curious too, as to how it is working with Coach Pry as a defensive mind, because obviously he comes from Penn State where he had a lot of success, you know, coaching guys like Micah Parsons, who's 1 year in the league, maybe the best linebacker in the NFL already. I mean,
Facts.
I was just watching Hard Knocks too. The dude was a freak before he'd even played a regular season game. But I'm curious as to what it's been like working with Coach Pry. You mentioned Pearson too, obviously a defensive back formerly at Virginia Tech. What's
phenomenal
it been like?
Athlete.
Yeah,
Pearson, phenomenal.
What's it been like working with those guys, Coach?
Man, it's been unreal. You know, as a defensive coach, you always want to work for a defensive-minded coach if you have the opportunity, and he brings all the other things to the table, because I think he understands the beliefs that we have. You know, you win championships with defense. The center of recruiting is going to be around defense. But more than anything is you have to have a certain mentality to play defense. And when you have a defensive-minded head coach, that mentality comes. You know, David Cutcliffe is my mentor, great offensive mind. And I spent 14 years of my entire coaching career with David Cutcliffe as an offensive-minded guy. You know, the last 2 years of my career has been with Matt Wells, who's an offensive-minded guy. So getting a chance to work with the guy that thinks like I think, talks like I talk, looks at recruits the way that I do, I mean, it's just a blessing. But also to have the head coach to have so much input on what you're doing on the defensive side of the ball, and not just from a schematic standpoint, you know, the mentality of the kids, the academics of the kids, and just everything. And you know, even in the evaluation process, you know, he's a defensive-minded guy, so he sees the things that we see. And sad to say, you know, defense is going to be first.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the good part about it. And Pearson has been a blessing to me, man, to have a guy, and these guys have a deep DB tradition, the D block tradition, and that's something that I've known about, heard about for a while, and been jealous of, so to speak.
You're part of it now.
Yeah. Man, be able to be a part of it. And, you know, Pearson has linked me up with so many different guys, you know, that have been fixtures in the secondary, just giving me numbers and saying, reach out to these guys, and then being able to bring my own brand of the Cheetahs into that and mixing it together, man. I think we have something that's going to be very, very powerful for us for years to come.
I love it. I love it, man. And shout out to Coach Cutcliffe. I just want to say, man, he made Duke a great program. It's not an easy job to take, man, because it's a basketball school as far as what people think. But they were a thorn in Virginia Tech side. You know, there were a few times we got the best of Duke, but they were tough and they were well coached. And he put some guys in the league. He graduated guys, man. I just want to make sure I give him his flowers right now, man. Just great mind, great person. I've had kids I mentored that were recruited by him. And they loved him. And it wasn't never easy not choosing Duke. Some did. So just really proud of what he did at Duke, man. Coach, I do want to ask you this, man. This is my last question for you, and then we'll let you jump off, man. You know, you've been in the business, and, you know, now you are a Hokie, and you have the season coming. We got ODU on the road, but then, you know, there's some games, you know, you got that Thursday night with West Virginia. You'll get a chance to experience into Sandman as a Hokie, as a coach. You know, when you think about that Virginia Tech tradition, that entrance, I know we want to win games, but what are you excited for as far as that entrance, that game, you know, games, or just this season? What are you looking forward to as far as a coach being at Virginia Tech, being part of the football program? What are some things that you're most excited about?
Well, you know, for me, man, I think one of my biggest niches as a coach is I still think like a player. I still get the same emotions that players get. I still have the same focus that players get. So, man, I mean, who can't get excited, you know, to have that interest, you know? Heck, I got excited when I was on the other sideline because it was just, you know, it's electrifying. And to see that and everybody in chemistry and just the complete energy all throughout the ball game. And I think that was the winning edge for Virginia Tech for a long time. So being able to experience that and being able to lure recruits to campus to see that and being able to sell those aspects, because those things are huge. I mean, you know, you signed there to go with yourself, and that's it. To be able to say that, you know, I work at a place that has one of the best atmospheres in all of sports, not just college football, NFL football, basketball. When I was at Duke, we had one of the best atmospheres in all of sports, but it was in the basketball arena. So, now I'm at a place where we have that in the football arena. So it just brings so many pluses. So just being able to sell this institution, being able to sell this program with such a storied history and, with Bud Foster having such a hands-on approach with us and still being around and getting to know him. His wife sold me my house. So being able to talk to him, actually know him and things like that, man. So it's just a lot of pluses, into something like this. It's like having something that's a blank canvas. And it's so many things that you can do with it, but a lot of the pieces are already in place.
Yeah, man, cool. This is really, really cool, man. And, I'm excited, man, to have you on, man. And you do a great job of connecting with the fans on Twitter, especially in the world of Twitter where, you got your trolls, you got the people that, think they know everything, but you're up there having fun. And it's just really cool to see, man. And we're glad you're part of the Hokie Nation, man. And we're definitely going to get you back on, if not on this one, on the Vic 757 show, talking all things tech, man, when we do that in the fall, which is, like you said, Chris said, it's like 5 weeks, right? They start, for them, they never end. But, as far as us, it's around the corner, man. But, Coach, man, we're excited, man. We appreciate you, man, jumping on, man. And we're excited for this season. And I know you guys are going to put in work. I was up there. I saw you guys putting in work, man. So once again, Danny and I really appreciate you jumping on, man.
Yeah, thanks,
Coach. I appreciate you guys having me on and understand this. I'm a 757 guy myself now. That's my recruiting area. So I definitely need to get on that show as well.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Yes, man. Yes. No. And we got a lot of viewers on that one as well, man. And I appreciate you, man, recruiting my area, man. And that, I'll say this before you jump off, man. We're evolving as a program. We're moving forward as fans and as guys that cover tech, man. But it feels good for you guys to respect our state. Like, I live in Northern Virginia now, so I've always been a VA guy. But Virginia, man, to see you guys really taking advantage of those relationships again, hitting up. I mean, I seen you guys in schools we ain't been in years. I mean, I'm like, man, y'all were at York High School, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all, and again, they got some players. It's just good to see that, man, especially the 7.5, but even the 703, the 804, the 5.4. It's just really good, man. And I know that work's going to pay off. So, again, salute to you, Coach. Appreciate you, man.
Man, well, I appreciate you guys having me on. Go Hokies.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go Hokies. Coach. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Take care,
guys.
Yes,
sir, man.
Yep, you too.
Yes, sir. It's Coach Derek Jones joining us, man. Cornerbacks coach and defensive recruiting coordinator, man. And just
more
a phenomenal guy.
Yeah.
Man, listen, we had two great guests, man. And those guys are phenomenal, man. And Coach is good. And I talked to him. I met him. I was around him once, and then I met him again at the I was up there for something. Then I was there again around him at the spring game. And he said, anything I could do to help you guys, and as well as, offered me to help him, recruiting, because, he knows who I am and my relationships. And that's what it's all about, man. Like, I think the last regime didn't understand that. Like, I just don't know how you get in business, or even if you're just trying to work with people, you don't understand being a people person. And that's where they missed the boat. He's definitely a people's guy. You and I know Pearson. He's family to us. And then, of course, I was up there talking to Xavier DB, and his brother, Nathaniel, was on the Vic 757 show. So they're DBs, are great people, great legacy at Tech. So, at the end of the day, man, I'm excited, man. I don't know what we're going to do, 7-6, 8-4. I think Chris said it's somewhere between, but I know one thing. If they can give it time, they got the right mix. Again, I know football is one of those things. You got to have talent. You got to have depth, but I'm excited for the future. I'm not even caught up in emotions right now. I'm not euphoric. I'm just talking about the consistency in what I've seen, the genuine interest of making things right and building a brand and having an identity is essential, man. What were your impressions of him?
Oh, it was great to actually meet him for the first time, even if just virtually. He seems like a really awesome guy, and stories like the one that he told about the interaction that he had with the guy at PK's, and now he's a regular at PK's and they're making him special wings and stuff like that. First of all, I love those stories, but I think that also says a lot about his character and the type of guy that he is and the type of staff that Coach Pry has, where, they're kind of putting down roots. They really want to build this thing right, and they want to do it with relationships. And he spoke of those relationships that Coach Pry wants them to have with those high school coaches. That was really cool to hear. And it should be music to fans' ears, right? Because like you said, this is exactly what the Tech program has been missing under Justin Fuente. And Coleman made a great point in that his weaknesses as a coach and his staff's weaknesses were exposed as more time went on, which had to do with player development and specifically recruiting. So we're still not to the first game yet. There's a lot that still needs to shake out before we actually get our real first impressions of this coaching staff. But man, it is just a completely different vibe around this team compared to last year, or even the year before. It feels optimistic, despite the potential black cloud looming over college football that is conference realignment. And I think Tech will be okay, no matter what happens. It is a shame that we're going to lose so many of those great rivalries potentially, but you never know. Yeah, something could change. We don't know. I'm not saying that it will, but we just have to kind of let it all play out, don't we?
Yeah. And you talk about that black crowd. It's that black cloud is like darkness. From the Chappelle show, it's darkness. It's darkness. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
but
sir.
It's a crazy time in the offseason, man, because you got that. And I'm sure between the NBA free agency, even we're done recording, you throw in, this expansion and moves. It's going to be between now and late August and September. It's going to be bananas, man. But I'll say this, man. If Tech stays in the ACC and it becomes some generic version of what it once was and we add different teams, I really, at the end of the day, it is what it is, man. I was in the Big East, man, and Tech fans showed up. We enjoyed that conference, and we were a damn good conference. Even though the ACC and other conferences didn't respect us, we showed people what we could do. And I just think right now, all I care about is Tech, man. Like when it comes down to it, I need Tech to win. And I don't mean just like win now this year. I mean like become what it needs to be for us. Like I don't have a favorite team. I support, as I always say this, I support the locals. Shout out to Bradley Beal. We already know what's going on with the Commanders. That even sucks to say.
I know.
The Commanders, but I need programs that I grew up loving to become what they need to be. Tech is my team, so I need them to become relevant and also competent on the field. Something where I give my 3 to 4 hours on Saturday. When I give that time, I need it to be something I enjoy. Man, people don't realize when Tech loses, man, my phone's blowing up. People are tagging me on Twitter. I'm in Twitter Spaces. Then, my Sunday's not good, man. I'm, breakfast don't taste good. The sun don't shine the same. But, it is what it is, man. But this has been great, Danny. We can always do this. We got to wrap up, man, with our legacy spotlights, man. I'll go first. We always, for those that it's your first time watching us or you've been following us, and for those that don't know, Danny and I always, Vicktory Life is about legacy, leave a legacy. That's the tagline. I'm a licensed therapist and mental health clinician, so I'm big on community. I'm big on the importance of overall mental health and just being holistic and loving each other. I speak life. So I'm always trying to give people a shout out, no matter if they're an athlete or whatever, cancer survivor. So for me, I was in the Berg, as I mentioned, doing some stuff with the ACC network. And I was up there and, seeing a lot of guys, man, and one of my guys who's my brother, he played a different sport, and that's Ace Custis, the legendary Ace Custis.
Yeah.
Him and his wife were celebrating their wedding anniversary. Same wedding anniversary my wife and I were celebrating, June 22nd. And, Ace always shows me love. I've done a legacy spotlight with him on my other podcast, the Vicktory Life Legacy Spotlight. And he had me come speak to the campers. Virginia Tech men's basketball was having a basketball camp, and he was like, yo, Vic, come talk to the campus, man. I was like, for real? You want me? He was like, yeah, I want you to speak to him, man. And, Ace, man, to see him on that staff, I saw him grind. People don't realize, man, when you're done playing, your career ends abruptly. You know when it's time, but you always want to keep playing. And his career ended. You go through a transition trying to figure out what's next. And I saw him grind. He coached at Maryland Eastern Shore, a small HBCU on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Virginia. And he worked his way up, and now he's a special assistant with Mike Young. And it's a matter of time before he will become a head coach. I know he's still got a ways to go, but he's paying his dues. I saw him and his wife there running back and forth with the campus. Hot. It was hot in Blacksburg, sweating.
Yeah.
He was getting sandwiches, and he was talking to the kids. He was paid his dues. And, I see guys like him coming back to his alma mater. It's the same thing that you see with JC. That shows you what that school and that university means. And Ace is a class act. He's always been humble. When I interviewed him, he credited his teammates, Damon Watlington and Sean Good and Troy Mans and Sean Smith. So the Jackson twins. So like he understands the importance of teamwork and brotherhood. So just want to give Ace a legacy spotlight. Shout out, man. Just phenomenal person, man. And kudos to him for mentoring those young athletes up there in Blacksburg, man. And the men's basketball team won the ACC. And you saw him with that ACC tournament championship trophy, carrying it. I think he was holding it. The next thing you know, Bruce Garnes had it and was in the, he was sleeping with it in the hotel. Yeah, shout out to my guy Ace, man. Who you got? I
love
man?
it. First of all, that's such a good story. That's such a cool story. Ace is one of those guys that it seems like he goes out of his way to make sure that he is seen around the program. And it's because he wants the fans to see him. He wants to see the fans. He wants to be around the program. And he just bleeds maroon and orange, like guys like Pearson and JC do on the football staff. Ace is one of those guys too. And there are lots of Hokies that play other sports that are the same exact way. So that's an awesome story. I definitely can't top it. But I got a few things here to bring up because I mentioned before we got on the air here that I was doing some traveling, and so I got to go. Yeah. I did some vacationing. Yeah. We went to the Outer Banks. My girlfriend and I we had a great time. Went to California for a wedding. Shout out my boy John Croson and his lovely wife now, Kristen Croson. Hokies. Congrats. Class of 2015. So we got to give a round of applause to a couple of Hokies getting hitched here in the month of June.
Blessings and cheers to a fruitful marriage.
Yeah, and we had a great time. We went to San Diego, California, my friend, and it was an absolute blast. So we had a good time there. I'm cobbling together a few legacy spotlights.
Wow, man, no, this our show. We can do 20 if we want to. You know what I'm saying? We don't got to get one. We can do 19.
It's been a while since we caught up, and I had a few big things on my mind. And the other thing that you brought up was Bradley Beal, which I'm not going to put the spotlight on him, although I'm very happy that Beal's going to stay in DC. He got a massive, massive contract at $251 million for 5 years.
Million. I like how you did that. Million, like
exactly. Man. Yeah, and he's already been paid big once too, man. So he is absolutely just cashing out.
And great player too. Great player.
I know, and I just my only wish is that they can get more around him. And that Porzingis, they just made a trade to send a couple of guys away. So we'll see what happens there. I'm happy that he's staying in DC. And another guy that I'm happy is staying in DC is Terry McLaurin. And
your guy.
Dude, there has been such bad press, and for good reason, by the way, around that franchise, because Dan Snyder is, we talk about how incompetent he's been. We've been talking about that for years. I mean, you and I have been talking about that for so many years, and fans alike. We've lost count with how many times we've been through situations like this where he's doing something stupid, or the workplace culture has been bad for 10 years. It's amazing that it's just now coming to light. But the fact that they were able to re-sign Terry McLaurin, and they gave him the most guaranteed money the wide receiver has ever been given in NFL history, I think it's fantastic because they needed him. If there was one thing that this regime under Ron Rivera needed to do, it was to re-sign Terry McLaurin. I think he's more of the core right now than Chase Young is. Now, Chase is going to come back this year. Hopefully he's coming off that ACL injury and he's healthy. But Terry, I'm so impressed by, first of all, his production. But Dwight, after he signed that contract, he posted on Twitter this long letter. And usually when a guy posts a letter, it's a thank you and a goodbye, right? This was just a thank you letter from Terry to the Commanders, Terry to the fans. And I'm not going to sit here and read the whole thing because it's actually quite long, but it was very heartfelt. He talked about, wanting to put in the work to reinstill the success that franchise had once experienced, the former glory that it was once enshrined with. And I just think that that's really cool. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. Not with Dan Snyder as the owner. You talk about a black cloud looming over something. He would be the definition of that.
He's darkness.
Yeah, man. But I tell you what, it was a great thing to see. And so back-to-back days, we got great news. Terry re-signed, Bradley Beal re-signed, and Dwight, there was a little bit of news later this afternoon from a Dominican Republic reporter and a Dominican Republic news outlet that the Nats are intensifying their talks with Juan Soto, and that number, it was at $350 million to try and get him. Now you got to really break out the checkbook, but it's gonna breach $400 million now, and they're saying it's going up to about $425. We'll see if that gets done. We'll
Man,
see if
that's
that
crazy.
gets done. How
I'm
much?
waiting on my direct deposit right now. 420 million.
I know, dude. It's crazy. What the baseball players get, it's crazy. It is. But
hey, you know he earned it. That's the market.
Absolutely.
I ain't no hater.
I was the same way with Terry. I'm the same mentality with Terry. So give him whatever he wants. You need to keep him here. It's important.
No doubt.
Legacy Spotlight, John and Kristen, Hokies, married couple,
Yes.
love him, and my boy Terry McLaurin. Glad he's staying in DC.
Hey, God bless your peoples, man. Look,
You,
I've been married 21 years, June 22nd, been with Shanice.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Yeah, it's all love. Thank you. 25 years together. Yeah, no, it's all good now, man. Listen, man, real life gets in the way. It's whatever, man. No, shout out to her.
Tell Shanice I said the same thing. I feel bad.
I will, man. We got to celebrate marriages, man, because, so many of them don't make it, but
it's true.
The ones that do, man, you put in work, man. And, shout out to your friends, man. And, shout out to all the fans out there and just everybody who supports what we do, man. We out here grinding, giving you insight and perspective. Doing these podcasts and shows aren't easy. People think we just turn on the mic, man, but we got to do some insight, got to pay attention to trends and things like that, man. And you and I have great chemistry. So crazy how God brought us together. You were the producer when I was on that joint with doing the 2013 spring game. I was the commentator, analyst, whatever. I don't know what the term is, but I was running my mouth. But appreciate you, man. Appreciate you always making time to link up with us, man. It's going to be a great year, man. 2022 is flying by. We are getting ready to head into the 4th of July, man. So everybody listening, before I do my sign off, y'all stay safe out there, man. Don't play with fireworks. You saw what happened to JPP out there looking like Luke Skywalker hanging from the ledge when Vader sliced him up. Be careful out there, yo.
Great comparison.
I don't play. Look, I speak for a lot of Black people. We don't play with fireworks, man. We look from a distance. We look from a distance. You know what I'm saying? I hear the popping. I look in the sky. But no, everybody, all jokes aside, everybody be safe, man. Have a blessed 4th, man. Thanks for joining us on the Vicktory Life Legacy Podcast. Danny and I wanted to thank everyone that supports us. And thank you to our guests, Chris Coleman of Tech Sideline and Coach Derek Jones, a.k.a. Cheetah, Virginia Tech's cornerback coach and defensive recruiting coordinator, man. Thank you to them both, man. And like I say, every episode, man, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a great impact. And you also have a great legacy, man. Thank you so much, man. To everybody. Appreciate you. Salute to everyone.